Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel, where ordinary lives unravel in the most unexpected ways. It started with the sound of my toothbrush vibrating on the counter. Not the cheating, not the lies, not even the disrespect. Just the toothbrush, buzzing against the granite like nothing was wrong, while everything was. I had just stepped out of the shower, towel around my waist, steam still fogging the mirror, when my phone lit up. Her name? A preview of a video message. And then, just beneath it, 4 words. Can't wait for tonight. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. She was in the other room. I could hear her laughing at something on TV, barefoot, relaxed, careless. She hadn't sent the message to me. The phone wasn't even hers. It was mine. Her iCloud was still signed in. Her mistake. I should have looked away. I should have just turned and walked back into that bathroom, finished brushing my teeth, and pretended like I never saw it. But I didn't. I pressed play. It was her face, not the one she shows me after work or on lazy Sundays. This face was different, brighter, lighter, almost glowing. I told him I'm just grabbing drinks with coworkers. Don't worry, he won't be there. I'll wear that dress you like. She winked at the end. The video ended, and I stood there, staring at the screen, holding a toothbrush like it was a weapon I didn't know how to use. 5 hours earlier, she asked me if I was okay with her going out. Just Clint and a couple of the legal guys, she said. I had told her no, not tonight, not with him. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Don't be so dramatic, Russ. It's just a bar." She walked out the door, humming, and now I knew the truth. It wasn't just a bar. It wasn't just drinks. And it definitely wasn't the first time, so I did something I never thought I would, something she never saw coming. I didn't yell, I didn't chase, I took action. And it started with a single text. Not to her, not to Clint, but to someone I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. I didn't expect him to reply. Not after how things ended between us. But I stared at my screen, thumb hovering, then hit send anyway. All it said was, "Still in town? Need a favor." Tonight, less than 2 minutes later, the typing dots appeared. Then, "Still have the storage key?" That was it. No small talk. No emotion, just one short message that told me he understood exactly what this was about. The man I texted was Declan, my older brother's best friend. Years ago, he helped me through a rough patch when my life was in pieces, and Rachel was the only thing holding me together. Back then, Declan had warned me she wasn't who I thought she was. I didn't listen. I accused him of jealousy, of trying to plant doubt. That fight ended our friendship. But that night, I realized he had seen something I hadn't. I didn't tell Rachel I'd seen the video. I didn't mention the message or Clint or her stupid wink. Instead, I cooked dinner. I even vacuumed. I pretended everything was fine, just to watch her lie to my face again. At 6:42 p.m., she walked out the door. Same perfume, same purse, same excuse. "Don't wait up," she said with a teasing smile. I smiled back. By 7:15, I was driving to the edge of town to meet Declan. The air felt heavier the closer I got. We met in an empty parking lot behind an old storage facility he used to rent for his side hustle, some kind of discreet tech repair and recovery thing. I never really understood it. All I knew was he kept gear in there, and secrets. He didn't say hello when I pulled up, just nodded, unlocked the unit, and stepped aside. Inside, everything was still where it used to be. Old monitors, backup drives, gear that looked like it belonged to a private investigator. He walked over to a table, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small black pouch. "Put this under her dashboard," he said quietly. It was a GPS tracker, legal if it was my car, and it was. I'd bought her that car 2 years ago. "I need proof," I said. "Undeniable. No, he said, she said. I want to know where she goes, when, and for how long." He didn't ask why. He didn't say "I told you so." He just handed it to me, then said, "You sure you want to know?" That question hung in the air. Because the truth is, I didn't. I didn't want any of this. I wanted to believe she loved me the same way I loved her. That her late nights were just networking. That Clint was just a name. But the look in her eyes during that video, the lightness, the thrill, I hadn't seen that version of her in years. Not with me, at least. I drove home and waited. Around midnight, she came back, laughing into her phone as she walked through the door. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair messy like she'd been dancing. She kicked off her heels, tossed her purse, and collapsed onto the couch. I asked how her night went. She told me they talked about client accounts and mergers and some boring legal nonsense. I just nodded. She had no idea her car was already telling me the truth. The next morning, she left early, said she had a brunch meeting with a new client across town and wouldn't be home until late afternoon. I nodded, still half asleep, watching her adjust her necklace in the mirror as if nothing in our lives was crumbling. As soon as the front door closed, I rolled over, reached for my phone, and opened the tracker app Declan had installed. It pinged. Her car was moving, heading west, not toward the fancy downtown restaurants where she usually met clients. No, this was different. I watched her GPS dot glide past the business district and into a quieter neighborhood. Then it stopped. An unfamiliar address popped up. Riverside Lounge. That wasn't a cafe. It wasn't even open during the day unless there was a private event. I Googled it. Live music, craft cocktails, adults only. It didn't even open until 6 p.m., but she was there at 9:42 in the morning. I felt that sick, sour burn in my chest again. My hands were clammy. I couldn't sit still. I threw on jeans, grabbed my keys, and got in my car. The tracker refreshed every 10 seconds. She hadn't moved. It took me 30 minutes to get there. I parked a block away, my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. I stayed low, cautious, circling the building until I found a side window. It wasn't much of a lounge in daylight, just dim lighting, half the tables covered in linen, a jukebox in the corner still flashing like it had forgotten the night was over. But at the far end, in a private booth, I saw her. Marla, she wasn't alone. Clint sat across from her, leaning in, his hand casually resting over hers. They weren't even pretending to be subtle. She laughed at something he said, then leaned closer and brushed something off his collar. My stomach twisted into something I can only describe as grief laced with humiliation. They looked like a couple, like we had never existed, like I hadn't spent the last 7 years holding her hair when she was sick, fixing her car in the middle of winter, celebrating every little promotion with takeout and cheap wine. I didn't storm in. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture through the crack in the curtain, then another and another. As I watched them sip drinks and share that booth like it belonged to them, I felt something new take root inside me. Not anger, not yet. Just this cold, calculated clarity. She was gone. Maybe not physically, maybe not legally, but emotionally, she had checked out and checked in with someone else. I waited in the car for over an hour. They eventually came out laughing, arms brushing as they walked toward her car. He opened the door for her. She leaned in and said something that made him smirk. Then they drove off, his hand on the steering wheel, hers resting on his thigh. I didn't follow. I already had what I needed. When she returned home hours later, she brought me a croissant, said her meeting ran long. I thanked her, forced a smile, and kissed her on the forehead. She still didn't know what I knew, but the countdown had started. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there beside her, watching the shadows shift on the ceiling while she breathed softly. Her body curled away from mine. Every so often, she'd murmur something in her sleep, but none of it sounded like my name. I stared at the ceiling fan and felt like a stranger in my own life. I had the photo. I had proof. But what do you do when the truth doesn't set you free? It just crushes you harder. By morning, I knew what I had to do. But I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to flip a table or play the victim. I was going to burn the illusion slowly, piece by piece, and watch what she did when she no longer had control of the script. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to walk into the light and blind her. I sent the photo anonymously. One message, one recipient. Thought you should see who your girlfriend's really spending her days with. I sent it to Clint's wife. I had found her name on his Facebook months ago when I first got suspicious. Her profile was private, but her profile picture was of her and Clint at a beach resort, smiling like nothing in the world could touch them. Less than an hour later, I saw she had read the message. Then came the typing bubbles. Then nothing. They disappeared. She was sitting with it, processing. I didn't know what would happen next, and honestly, I didn't care. All I needed was for one person to light a match. The rest would catch fire on its own. Marla came home early that evening. She was jumpy, kept glancing at her phone and biting her lip. I acted like I didn't notice, made her coffee, asked how her day went. She lied. I smiled. It was a silent dance now. Two people pretending they still shared something real. An hour later, she went into the bathroom and stayed there longer than usual. I stood outside the door and listened. I heard her gasp, then the soft slam of her hand against the counter. The water ran, then silence. When she came out, her face was pale, lips tight. "Everything okay?" I asked, pretending to scroll my phone. "Yeah," she said. "Just a headache." She barely touched her dinner, didn't mention Clint, barely looked me in the eye. But her fingers wouldn't leave her phone, and I could tell something had shifted. The confidence was cracking, the lies were fraying. I didn't push. I wanted her to feel the pressure slowly. That night, she said she was too tired to talk. Went to bed early. I stayed up, watching the hallway. At 1:13 a.m., she came out of the bedroom quietly and tiptoed to the living room. I didn't move. I listened as she sat on the couch and whispered into the phone. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough. "I don't know who sent it. She must have found out. Clint, you said you'd handle this." My blood went cold. She didn't even use my name. She didn't even care that I might be listening. And still, even after everything, part of me wanted to believe she'd come clean. But she didn't. She crept back into bed like a thief returning to the scene. She had no idea the next move wasn't mine. It was hers, and I was going to make sure she walked straight into it. The morning after her whispered call to Clint, Marla was already dressed before I even got out of bed. That alone was strange. She wasn't a morning person, never had been. I found her in the kitchen, standing over a cup of coffee she clearly had no intention of drinking. Her eyes were puffy, like she hadn't slept, and her phone was gripped so tightly in her hand I could see the whites of her knuckles. She looked up at me with this rehearsed expression, soft, a little apologetic, and completely fake. "I need to go into the office early," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Emergency meeting," I shrugged. "Everything okay?" She hesitated just long enough to confirm everything wasn't. "It's nothing to worry about. Just chaos at work." She kissed me on the cheek before leaving, but there was no weight in it. It felt like a placeholder, like she was checking a box so I wouldn't ask too many questions. And maybe once, that would have worked, but not anymore. Not after the photos. Not after hearing her say Clint's name like it was some kind of lifeline. Once she left, I opened the tracker app. She didn't go to her office. She didn't even pretend to. She drove in the opposite direction, straight to the same neighborhood from before. Not the Riverside Lounge this time, a residential street. A house I didn't recognize. I screen recorded the GPS trail, time-stamped it, saved it twice. Then I sat there on the couch, staring at the wall, realizing I didn't even want to know what was happening inside that house. Because deep down, I already knew. But the twist came 3 hours later. She came back home, not to change, not to clean up, but to talk. She walked into the living room like she was entering a courtroom. I didn't speak first. I wanted to see what version of the truth she was about to serve me. "We need to talk," she said quietly, her voice cracking just a little. "I know something's been off between us, and I've been confused about everything. About us, I said nothing." She looked down at her hands, then back up. "I want to be honest with you, Russell. Clint kissed me, but I stopped it. I told him it was wrong and it shouldn't have happened. I didn't want to tell you because I knew how it would sound." I nearly laughed out loud. That was the version she was going with? That it was a kiss, one kiss, that she was the victim of an uninvited gesture? I nodded slowly. "So, he kissed you? That's all?" "Yes," she whispered. "Just once." I pulled away. I stood up, walked over to the dining table, and picked up the envelope I had printed the night before. Inside were stills from the surveillance footage, her hand in his, her leaning into his shoulder, her lips close to his ear. I didn't need to say a word. I just slid the envelope across the table. She didn't touch it. She just stared at it like it was ticking. When she finally opened it, her face collapsed. Not in guilt, in panic. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught lying about it. "You followed me?" she asked, her voice low. "No," I said calmly. "You followed your desires." I just paid attention she didn't cry. Not then. She just stared at me, completely still. I could see her brain calculating, trying to find the next move, the next excuse, the next soft lie that might still work. But she was out of rope, and I was done handing her more. After sliding the photos across the table and watching her face go pale, I didn't scream. I didn't even raise my voice. That's what threw her off the most. Marla had always been the type to feed on emotion, tears, panic, yelling. She knew how to spin it all into sympathy. But when I gave her nothing, just silence and steady breathing, it was like I short-circuited her entire strategy. She spent the rest of that day moving around the house like a shadow. She didn't ask if we were okay. She didn't offer explanations. She just existed near me without really being there. I didn't try to talk either. I was already past the part where words mattered. The next morning, I sent one text, not to her, to her parents. Dinner tonight? Need to talk. Just us three. I hadn't spoken to them in months. Not because we didn't get along, but because Marla had slowly created distance, saying they were too judgmental or always interfering. Turns out, she just didn't want anyone too close to the truth. But they liked me, especially her dad. So, when I sent the message, her mom responded in minutes. Of course. 7 p.m. Perfect. At 6:15, I told Marla I was going out for air. She asked where I was going, but I didn't answer. Just looked at her and walked out the door. I arrived early. Her parents greeted me warmly, but you could feel the tension crawl in behind me. Her mom poured wine. Her dad sat at the head of the table, his eyes searching mine like he already knew something was wrong. I'm just going to be honest, I said, setting the photos down between the salt and pepper shakers. Marla's been lying to all of us. At first, they just stared. Then slowly her mom reached for the envelope. Her hands trembled as she looked at the images. Her father leaned in, his mouth tightening with each photo he examined. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't cry. I just laid out the timeline, the evidence, the texts, the whispered phone call, the secret meetings, and how she had lied to my face even after being caught. Her mom looked like someone had slapped her. Her dad just sat back in his chair and muttered, "I warned her about this." That made me flinch. "You did?" He nodded slowly. "I've known Clint for a long time. Never liked him. Didn't like the way he looked at her at the wedding. But Marla's stubborn, and when she starts something, she doesn't stop until it burns down around her. For a second, I felt this strange comfort, like I wasn't crazy, like someone finally saw what I saw. I left shortly after. I didn't ask them to intervene. I didn't need them to. I just wanted them to know the truth before the explosion, before everything broke in public. When I returned home, Marla was pacing in the hallway. "Where were you?" I hung up my coat, walked past her, and said one sentence that made her knees nearly buckle. "I had dinner with your parents." She froze. "Why?" I turned to face her. "Because they deserve to know who you've become." And just like that, the panic hit her. All at once. Her perfect world, the one she curated with half-truths and carefully placed lies, it was beginning to fall in on itself. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. That's when I knew I wasn't the only one she was lying to. She had betrayed everyone, her family, our friends, and maybe even herself. The fallout had only just begun. The morning after I had dinner with her parents, Marla didn't go to work. She claimed she had a migraine, but we both knew it was fear. Fear of what I'd said, fear of what they now knew, fear that the foundation of lies she built was finally cracking beneath her expensive shoes. She stayed in her robe, clutched her phone like a lifeline, and barely made eye contact. The silence between us was different now, not tense, not cold, but heavy. It was the kind of silence that knows the end is near. Around noon, she got a call. I watched her glance at the screen, hesitate, then quickly step out onto the balcony. Through the glass door, I could see her pacing, gesturing, shaking her head. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. It was Clint, probably asking what damage control needed to happen, now that his wife and her parents were looped in. She stayed out there for nearly 15 minutes. When she finally came back in, she didn't say a word, just went straight to the bedroom, shut the door, and locked it. A few hours later, she emerged with makeup on, hair fixed, dressed like she was going to church, or a funeral. She said she had errands. I said nothing. She left, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't wonder where she was going. I already knew it wouldn't matter soon. What I didn't expect was the phone call I got later that day, from Clint's wife. I answered, unsure what to say, but she beat me to it. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. Her voice was calm, but tight, like someone holding back the scream behind her teeth. "You did the right thing. You didn't owe me anything, but you gave me clarity. I only wish someone had done the same for you sooner." She paused. "They're done, by the way." He confessed, cried, tried to say it was a mistake. Classic. I told him to pack his things and leave. I'm not a fool, and neither are you. I didn't know how to respond. The call ended shortly after, but her words lingered with me like a gust of cold wind. I wasn't a fool. Not anymore. That evening, Marla returned, her face drained of color, mascara slightly smudged at the edges. "We need to talk," she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. She sat across from me at the table, eyes down. She reached for my hand. I didn't move. "I made mistakes," she began. "I know that. But I need you to believe that it wasn't just about him. It was about how lost I've felt. In us. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't want to lose you, but I didn't want to be honest either. And I'm sorry it was the closest thing to a real confession she'd given me. But it was too late. You can't beg for trust once you've buried it under months of deceit. I think we should take a break," she said finally. "Some space. Time to breathe." I smiled, not because I agreed, but because I had already packed a bag. Her version of a break was me stepping aside while she sorted her chaos. My version was something else entirely. I stood, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled out my suitcase. Her eyes widened, just slightly. "You already—" "I've been done for weeks, Marla. You just didn't notice." She followed me to the door, barefoot, trembling, trying to form words she'd never thought she'd have to say. But I didn't wait. I stepped outside, shut the door, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I exhaled without choking on her lies. Leaving wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no thrown objects, no teary last-minute embraces. It was quiet, clean, final. And for once, I didn't feel like I was the broken one for walking away. I wasn't running from pain. I was walking toward clarity. The first night alone was strange, not painful, just unfamiliar. I stayed at a small rental on the edge of town, the kind of place with outdated wallpaper and a humming mini fridge. I stared at the ceiling that night and waited for the regret to hit, but it didn't. What hit instead was relief. Heavy, warm, undeniable relief. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't obsessing over every text or tracking her car or reading into silences. I wasn't playing detective in my own marriage. I was just breathing again. Marla tried to reach out a few times in the following weeks, polite texts at first, then longer ones, with phrases like, "We had something real," and "Can't we at least talk?" I didn't respond, not because I was trying to punish her, but because I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not closure, not apologies, not explanations. She'd already said everything I needed to hear when she chose someone else while pretending I was still her home. What surprised me most was how quickly the light came back. Not in some dramatic movie montage kind of way, but slowly, steadily. I reconnected with old friends. I stopped checking my phone every 2 minutes. I started sleeping through the night. I even signed up for a photography course, something I used to love before I became consumed by trying to hold together a relationship that was already slipping away. Months later, I saw her, by accident, at the grocery store. She looked surprised. I didn't. I smiled, nodded, and kept walking. That was it. No words, no wait. She became just another person with a cart full of distractions. And me, I was free. So, no, this isn't a story about revenge or rage. It's about waking up. About learning that love without honesty is just noise, and that peace is louder than any apology that comes too late. And for those who've been through something similar, or are still in it, I'll tell you this: silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the strongest decision you can make. You've been watching Reddit Confessions. If you've ever had to walk away from something toxic to rediscover yourself, drop a comment below. And for fun, tell us one historical event you wish you could have witnessed in person. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.